The best way to get better at programming is to practice. And in this example, we're going to use a Foreach loop, comparing it to a for loop inside of Java. As always, this file is available for download. Use a link provided below in the description. We'll pause for a few seconds so you can start it, and then you can either attempt it on your own or follow along with us. All right, so let's get started. You'll notice that on line 6, I'm importing java.util. Well, the reason why is I want to create a random number generator. So I'm going to say random, and then I'll use lowercase random for my variable name, equals new random. And you can see it just like that. The only reason I have access to random is because I imported java.util. That's where random is found. I'm going to create a traditional for loop first. So you're going to say for int I equals 0, I is less than values.length I++. And then I'm going to say values, use my square brackets and I. So I'm saying the specific value at this index is equal to random dot, and I'm going to say next int. I'm going to give it a bound. This is going to say this is as big as it can be, so 100. So this is going to help us initialize these random values. Now on line 10, I'm creating a variable values that is an array of size 10. I could easily make this 1,000 or 50 or 10 like I did. So this is an easy thing to change. This loop is going to work no matter what. So let's look at the for each loop inside Java. Now I'm using Visual Studio Code, and it has an interesting thing. If I start to type for, you notice it actually has for each. And this is going to allow me, if you notice, it says to iterate over an array, or anything that's technically what we call iterable. But if I hit the tab key, notice it doesn't write for each. It writes a for loop. It starts off similar to our for loop, except it's a little bit different. We have int I, just like we did before, but then we say colon values. Notice it's a colon, not a semicolon. And what it's going to do is it's going to go over each individual value inside of values and assign it temporarily to I. So I'm going to come down inside my loop body, system.out.println I. Now if I run this, you notice we get some different values, okay? So I got 0, 52, 18, etc. If I run this again, I'll get some different values, 12, 97, 82, etc., etc. So this is the for each loop. You'll notice that's really fast to write. It's really simple and kind of obvious. This might be a little bit more familiar if you're used to a language like Python. However, there is a couple things I do want to point out real quick though. First off, your for each is slightly slower than a for loop. Now, how much slower? Not a lot. Probably in the 5, 10, 15%, depending upon your processor and how big a loop you have and different things like that. Okay, so it is a little bit slower, and that is something that you need to be careful of. But it has another interesting limitation. I'm going to come up here, remove our initial for loop and say, what happens if I want to use a for each loop there? So I'm going to say for each. Once again, it's smart enough to say int I colon values. Why? Well, it knows that values is my only iterable object. Therefore, that has to be it. Inside my loop body, I say I equals random dot nextInt 100, just like I did before. Okay, so there's nothing that's changed there. I'm going to go and run it. And notice I get all 0 values. Well, I could. Statistically, it is possible to get 10 zeros as a random value. But what's the odds? So let's run it again. And I get it again. And if I run this again and again and again, you're going to see the exact same thing happen. So why is it? Well, my default value for an array, if I don't give it initial values, is 0. That's what I'm seeing. You go, but I'm assigning a random value. Well, in the for each loop, I is a separate value. It's not the value at the index of that array or other iterable structure. It is a separate value. And so when we get it, I is equal to 0, we assign a random value, but we never update that individual value inside of our array or other iterable object. So for each is only good for reading values, not for writing to values. And that's an important fact that you need to remember if you're going to use the for each loop. Hopefully you found this example helpful in learning how to use Foreach loops and when not to use Foreach loops inside of Java. Please give the video a like and consider subscribing so you can see other videos on learning how to get better at programming in Java.